Yo guys, what is up? And today we have another week of grosses, so let's get into it. Up first we have & Juliet, which went from 77% last week to 89% this week, and 674K to 812K this week. This was a much needed win for & Juliet, which has had a horrendous fall. And if you look at the grosses over the past year, & Juliet had been doing pretty solid. I think the last time it made $1 million was back in March or April. So it has truly been the past 2 months where it's fallen off considerably. And obviously Charli D'Amelio is coming in as stunt casting, and as I've stated before, & Juliet is in its kind of twilight years. When shows start stunt casting, you know that's when shows are in big trouble. So & Juliet, I think, will still be here at least a year from now. I think it's gonna take them a while to, you know, do horrendously bad. It's just getting by at the current moment. Could it close at the end of the year? I don't think so. I think that these numbers kind of show that this was a bit of a lull and that the show is probably going to come back to life, and October is a much better month typically for a lot of musicals than September, and then we have Thanksgiving and Christmas, we have the spring, and then we have the summer. So I think with all of that in mind, I think & Juliet will make it. Will it be here in 2 years from now? I don't know about that, but I think for right now it is fine. It's not doing good by any means. It's in its twilight years. That's ultimately what it comes down to. And some shows just have a lifespan, and & Juliet's lifespan is coming to an end. Back to the Future. When is this show gonna close? When is it gonna close? When is it gonna close? Do you know when it's gonna close? Because it's genuinely surprising. This week, or last week, 64%, 604K. This week, 75% and 709K. I mean, as we've been over before, this musical on a weekly operating costs is like $900. So it is so off the mark. And it's not a matter of is this show gonna close, but when. This show is closing at the end of this year. It is going to close. Like, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. And what a fall. Cabaret, the Kit Kat Club, went from 91% to 86%, and 989K to 938K. Like I predicted, this was a stunt casted revival, and stunt casting revivals after their first stars tend to fall off and then close. So this will most likely close in March when the two leads leave. Eddie could come back, but again, as we've seen many times with Hugh Jackman and Music Man, Bette Midler, and Hello Dolly, simply put, you cannot replace those stars. The only time it worked was Sweeney Todd with Aaron and Sutton, and that was only for a limited time. But even then, the show was still making over $1 million. It was the only time. But I do think that's because Aaron and Sutton hadn't been on Broadway in a long time, and Sutton was in Sound of Music, Aaron was in Moulin Rouge, so there was definitely a bit more of a low for them. Although, you know, Aaron's managed to hold his box office when he went back to Moulin Rouge, but with Once Upon a Mattress, Sun Foster's box office clearly has suffered, and it seems that she needs a co-star, either a Hugh Jackman or a Aaron Tveit, to justify getting to like $1 million. But yeah, it's too expensive. It costs like $1 million to put on. I mean, if you've been to see the show, you know how expensive it is. Yes, it's a simple set, but they not only did that, but they completely renovated the entire theater, and it's just like, yeah, no, like, this is the kind of show that unfortunately has to make $1 million every week. Maybe 1 week where it makes, you know, 989K like last week, cool, but it's clearly not in any position that it's going to stay open. Hadestown went from 94% and 623K to 95% and 706K. Again, it's just getting by. It's probably just about making its weekly operating costs, maybe losing a bit of money. But as we've stated several times on the channel, Hadestown was honestly probably would have closed this year if not for stunt casting, and clearly Hadestown's time on Broadway is being extended by stunt casting, and now we're seeing the effects of stunt casting is that you can only stunt cast so much before eventually you run out and you close. So that's essentially what's happening with Hadestown. I know there's a couple of bigger names coming in, but I ultimately do believe that this will stay here for at least another year, but I definitely do think at some point the stunt casting kind of runs out, and they've been relying on that for the past year. And so I think once that is truly done, I think we will see Hadestown close. And it's not great. The last 2 weeks have not been great. Shows that have 7s and 6s are not typically doing very well. And if you are doing 7s, like, and you're just starting out, then that's fine. Or if you have a week or two, but multiple weeks is not great. Now, admittedly, 2024 has been a pretty decent year for Hadestown. It's had a couple of $1 million weeks. It did 9s and 8s over the summer, so it's definitely got enough. It's not like it's doing these numbers the whole year. If it was doing these numbers the whole year, then I was like, yeah, they could close this year, but they're not closing this year. But they're definitely not in a position where I'm confident that they will make it 5 more years. Like, I think that clearly Hadestown was at the end of its lifespan and was given a Hail Mary through stock casting. Hamilton went from 90% to 92%, and 1,570,538 to 1,675,734. Harry Potter continues to do poorly, 80% and 902K last week, and 84% and 948K. I think if it continues to go down this path, it will close most likely next year, or maybe the year after that. It hasn't done horrible this year, but this is the worst business-wise Harry Potter has ever done. And as you know, a very expensive production to put on. So expensive that it's now 1 part instead of 2 parts. I think if it was still 2 parts, it would have closed by now. But yeah, Harry Potter is doing horrendous. Hell's Kitchen continues to do amazing, 98% and 1,154,611 last week, to this week's 97% and 1,389,251. Moulin Rouge, and I think this was Aaron and JoJo's last week, went from 96% and 1,083,713 to 99% and 1,381,461. And again, this show, if it hadn't got stunt casting, would have probably closed this year, but they got Boy George, they got Aaron to come back twice now, so it's a show that's relying on stunt casting, because before Aaron came in and after Boy George left, $900,000. This show is at the end of its lifespan, and is being held on by stunt casting, just like Anne Juliet is, and Hadestown, because without stunt casting, I'm pretty sure this would have closed. It's obviously had a decent 2024. I don't think it's going to close this year or even next year. We'll see how much longer they can keep up the stunt casting, but eventually stunt casting kind of runs out, and then you're left with your show. So again, it's had a nice, healthy time on Broadway, but if I'm being honest, I think eventually, I don't know how long they can continue to stunt cast this. You can only bring Aaron back so many times, let's put it that way. 6 went from 79% to 81%, and 618K to 688K. 6 is doing 600s, but it's fine. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. Obviously, listen, I'll be honest, these are not good numbers. Any show that has a 6 in front of it, no matter how long it's been going on, no matter how much money it made that year, it's bad. It's not good. But again, 6 is such an inexpensive production to put on. They've recouped their investment that I think they can, for a bit, survive on 6s or 5s or 7s and be able to make it another 2 or 3 years. Now, having said that, clearly the past 2 months, 6 has had a noticeable drop-off, because in the fall, or in the summer, it wasn't doing that bad. So this was definitely a big surprise. But again, I think it's just showing its aging. And again, a lot of what happens is shows just end up showing their age. Enough people have seen it, the interest goes down. It's the circle of life, it's the circle of musicals, and that's what happens. And it's that simple. You know, people think, oh, it's some bigger thing, and it's like, no, sometimes shows just close, and people lose interest, and the people that have wanted to see it have seen it, and it's done. But that needs to happen, otherwise we wouldn't get a new musicals every season. Stereophonic went from 99% to 96%, and 849K to 784K, continuing to do amazing. I think this could have gone on open-ended. I don't think it needed to be a limited engagement, but I think in a post-COVID universe and with the marketplace of musicals being so unpredictable, limited engagements are the smartest bets, which is a sad commentary on the theater industry itself, but it does mean that it will make more money and people will come and see it more quickly. But I think this show clearly has enough of a hype and a buzz that it could make it, you know, to the end of this year and probably be doing similar numbers, if maybe not a little bit less. I mean, shows like this tend to fall off after the first year, so obviously Stereophonic a year from now maybe would be doing 6s and 5s or maybe 7s, but again, it is a play. Plays are a lot less expensive to produce than musicals, and it has recouped its investment, and it's one of the most successful plays financially. Subs had its worst week yet, going from 85% to 77%, and 747K to 679K. I do think that this will most likely close at the end of the year. They could extend because it has done better than I expected, and it's done better than Shucked, which is kind of probably similar budget to Suffs. I think it made $1 million, so I could 100% see this continuing into the new year, but ultimately I think, you know, 6s and 7s is okay numbers, but if there's another better show that's gonna, you know, prove to make more money, they're gonna go with that show. And again, its weekly operating costs are probably in the 6s or 7s, and it's probably just a little bit under that, probably just making it. So again, when a show is just making it or just barely making it, theater owners can exercise the clause like they did with Beetlejuice to say, hey, we're gonna close you. And I think I could see stuff losing a lot of money in January and February, and when the new spring season starts. But you know what? It's doing solid. It's doing decent. It definitely could, but it definitely could continue on. But it's definitely in a place where it's justifiable, where you could close it before things get too bad. Because I have a good feeling that stuff would just deteriorate in quality, box office wise. Sunset Boulevard was a huge smash, going from 100% to 93%. And 304K to 1,075,922. Gatsby went from 85% to 85%, and 990K to 1,049,793. I know a lot of people hate it, but it's making bank, it's making money, it's making a mill. This thing's gonna be here for a while, at least until next year. You know, this time next year, it's still gonna be here. Will Jeremy and Eva affect the finances? Maybe, but I don't think too much, because The Great Gatsby and the spectacle of it draws in audiences and tourists probably more than their fans, but it definitely will make a difference. It depends on who they get to replace them. But again, I think with Christmas, Thanksgiving, summer, I think it's, you know, I think this will be here at least another 2 years. I think Gatsby's in it for the long haul, but we'll see. Things could change. I wouldn't be surprised. It definitely is a show that could decrease out of nowhere and then not come back. And it is a very expensive production to put on, so even a few weeks of bad numbers can be enough to close a show. The Notebook continues to do horrible, going from 77% and 530K to 79% and 605K, and that's closing. The Outsiders sells out, going from 1,337,388 to 1,405,119. And Water for Elephants, which is also closing, went from 62% to 61%, and 623K to 656K, basically staggering its way to closing. So those are the grosses for this week. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.